This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on air with Dean Davidson. You're an actor and writer of Special Forces and CIA thrillers. Welcome to the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing this afternoon?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to talk to people. We've always talked to creative people since 2016. With live podcast interviews, we've done about 1,300, and we just love talking to creative people, especially authors and writers in any genre. One thing, but before we get to the top to your story, is that we always ask a question of any guest on the show. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Motivation as a writer, it's definitely not money, that's for sure. But the best way to describe it, I think, is I've got a very good friend of mine, Terry Weaver, who's also a writer and an actor. And Terry's been very encouraging during this process. And he's always had this saying that everyone has a story to tell, right? So it's just a matter of whether or not you take the opportunity to do it. And for whatever reason, for many years, I've been trying to write a book. I've probably started 10 over the years, and then I get 11 chapters in, and then just something else happens. I get distracted and then never go back to it. But this particular story was kind of personal in a way, and so it took some pushing and prodding to finally get it. But it was a story I wanted to tell, not specifically from my perspective, but because of who I was writing it for and about. And so really to kind of humanize some of these individuals and kind of get that story out, even in a fictitious way. But the story's kind of, it's fiction around real life events.
So the book, is it the Amir?
It is the Amir, the Tora Bora Vendetta.
Yeah, so that's what I've got. Well, I've got the short part. Just so everybody know, but we've got your QR code up now, so people can check out your website, and I'll put that back up so people can do that. But if they take their phone and take a QR code, they can actually check your author website, and then kind of follow along while we talk about it if they want to look. So what made you want to take your experiences in life and write stories?
I think part of it is I've been a voracious reader since I was a kid. I was reading Shakespeare and Poe when I was probably 10 and 11 years old. The Greek tragedies, just started reading as a kid, and the stories that really captivated me were ones where there was always a distinctive, hero in the story, and there was a lot of conflict. And through military service and through military contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan for 15 years, those conflicts became real life events. And so I think it was just a natural progression to want to, bring those together to tell stories. People like Tom Clancy and Jack Carr have kind of, really been an influence in terms of wanting to tell, Dick Couch and others. And even, they always say you never to meet your heroes, but, and I know that Dick was Marchenko was kind of a hate him or love him kind of guy, but was very fortunate to get to know Marchenko for a short period of time, and he was just incredibly gracious. So people like that really kind of influenced me to want to do this.
I think it's really cool when people are able to kind of tell a story and actually get it out of themselves and put it into the ether and get it into the world. And not everybody does that. Like you said, you have fits and starts. It's kind of like the artist way. I deal with a lot of musicians and filmmakers, and stuff on the cutting room floor, the stuff that never comes out.
Yep.
And sometimes it's like you have to really, sometimes people around you, or you finally get that moment, say, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to really push it out there. And it looked like you got to that point where now you got it out there as your debut novel.
It's yeah, no, that's really true. And it was one of those things. It's like, am I ever going to finish this? Am I ever going to do this? And then when I finally finished it and I submitted it to the publisher and it got picked up, um, it was like, wow, I can really do this. I mean, you talk about accomplishments or you talk about things that are difficult. To me, being in Iraq or being in Afghanistan or doing some of those things,
That's a lot harder.
that's the easy stuff. Trying to finish a book and put it out there, and something you've tried to do creatively and put it out there. Is
Oh,
anybody
that's
going to
hard.
like it? Anybody going to hate it? And actually finishing it and putting it out there, that it's like, wow, that now that I've done that, I know I can do this. I know what those steps are, and this has definitely been a learning process during this first book. There's a lot of things I learned that, unless you just go through it, you never know. So you know what to look out for in the next one.
Yeah.
Um, and you realize after you get the book published, and you go, wow, I made some mistakes here. I can change that. I can do better on the next book, and moving forward,
Yeah.
I can
It's
add
like the
things to.
artist. It's the artist thing. Is like a lot of times, I talk to people, musicians especially. We kind of live in a flow state.
Hmm.
And then, it's a couple of things. Like we get our 10,000, 20,000 hours of muscle memory, learning how to play the bass or play whatever, or our voice. And
Oh
we
yeah,
learn how to master it. And then you learn the theories and stuff. But then you figure out like how you break those things. And then you say, like, how do I take that and then synthesize like what's in my subconscious,
yeah.
and then what's, as a writer, what I've always heard, and I've talked to a lot of authors, is that you're very observant,
Oh
and
yeah.
you pick up all the stuff around you, but you also pick up the stuff, like I said, the subconscious stuff, the stuff that's coming from your internal,
Oh
and
yeah.
then it's the external, and the synthesis of that and how that balances is like that's everybody's secret recipe.
Well, and there's a lot to that. And what I've done for a career for the last 25 years, and active duty service. I mean, those are things where you definitely learn to pay attention to detail, right? Um, but I think just human nature for me as an individual, like even in high school and being in an acting class and all those, used to go to the mall back in the 80s when the mall was actually a place that
Yeah,
everybody went
thing.
to,
Well,
and
it was a
and,
thing. Yeah.
and you just sit there and just people watch, right? And I used to do that where I would just go and I'd watch somebody, and I'd just kind of keep an eye on them, what's their mannerisms, how do they walk, how do they scratch their forehead or their nose, or all these different things. And then you go into class on Monday, into theater class, and then try to
Use
mimic
that
that in some way, right?
as an actor. Yeah. So that's
So
interesting.
yeah, I find those kinds of things. What you said, you pick up on details of things, but what you were talking about, I think a moment ago, as a musician, I think it's the same as an actor or writer or anything else. You've got to learn those fundamentals. You got to build that foundation of knowledge, and once you've kind of maybe not mastered it, but you've done it enough to where you've got the building blocks there, then you can start experimenting with some of the rules and some of the
Yeah.
things that a
Start
little
playing.
bit. Yeah, so experimenting with things is always fun, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's fun to see what'll stick.
Because it's interesting when I've talked to like some fantasy novelists, and they do all this world building, and they build these structures, and they put a lot of work into like the infrastructure of their world,
Oh yeah.
the character structures, and it's very kind of orchestrated. Like you think about it in music, it's like a classical musician reading Beethoven, Bach. It's like very structured,
Oh yeah.
right? But then when it gets to the dialogue or like some of the stuff that might be kind of free flowing, might be flow state, and it'll let that come in where it needs to come in. And so it's kind of like I'm wondering. I always ask every artist different approach. Like how much of it is like highly organized, structured, flow charted out, and how much of it is kind of flow state.
I think in the beginning, as you're building that foundation, right? Those fundamentals, I think it's probably 90-10, 80-20, somewhere in there. But I think as you develop your experience and your skill set, um, I think you can kind of go a little more opposite, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I could be wrong, but I think you look at people like Miles Davis. I mean, him and Thelonious Monk, man, those are guys that were almost pure flow state
It's
from
all
some
flow. Yeah.
perspective. Yeah, and he's, I mean, and Monk, man, I mean, between flow state and just experimental stuff, I mean,
Yeah.
that man's brain was just going crazy all over the place.
It's like
Brilliant.
Coltrane and like
Oh,
Sun Ra. It's like they have the mastery, but then they started to kind of break it. They look at the canon. They
yep.
understood the canon, but in order to break the canon, you kind of have to understand it, right? And
Amen.
so that's where they come from, and the ability. And then what I always thought was interesting was their ability to bring in a guy like Coltrane, and they actually have you know uh, all these great people around him. You know, Davis would bring in all these great guys around him and not be intimidated.
Oh
To
no,
take
I think he was the intimidator.
He was the intimidator, but I mean, some of the guys around him were just as good at chops as he was. But
Oh yeah.
it just depends. Like it's how much do you pull from those around you, and how much do you direct those around you? And when you build your own world as an author, like you're like these guys are like they just write everything, or you get a guy like like a Prince, like he did everything.
Oh,
When you're a story writer, as
that's
author, you're building your whole world, like you.
yeah. That I mean, you talk about Prince. I mean, I put him right up there with the likes of Miles Davis and others. Man, I mean that was just pure genius. I mean, he really was, and he was so schooled on theory and history and just obscure artists, and I mean and he wasn't just in one particular genre. I
He's
mean,
all over the place.
he was all over the place, and he just absolute brilliance. I mean, I remember watching an interview with Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top,
Yeah,
talking about the night that they got together, and they just talked. I mean, talking about like old kind of juke joint type musicians that Billy Gibbons grew up going to see, and and Prince knew who these people were, people that nobody else around him had known who they
obscure
were
people.
for like
Yeah,
40 years. And Prince is having these detailed conversations about chord progressions of these people, and he's just like blown away by
he just eating it. Well, he just absorbed, everything that was out there and then synthesized it. And
yeah.
that's like the artist. Like what you want is somebody who kind of looks at the whole world, the whole universe of what's out there, and then kind of is like, hey, I'm not gonna stay in a lane.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like a smorgasbord. I'm gonna pick and choose and then figure out how to put this together.
Well, and that's music's always played a big part in my life. Even I mean, these days the only thing I play is the radio. But I mean, I grew up playing trumpet as a kid,
Hmm.
and between Satchmo and Dizzy and Chuck Mangione and Herb Alpert, I mean, those were my influences. And a few years ago, I was very blessed to attend a concert um, Herb Alpert did here in Texas, and actually ended up getting a signed autographed trumpet from him.
Wow, that's
Uh,
awesome. Yeah,
but yeah, that was one of my heroes. I remember when Rise came out, and
I
that was
realize.
kind of you taking a little bit of blues, a little bit of funk, a little bit of all kinds of
Everything.
different things, and mixing it into what originated out of like the Tijuana brass days and blending it all together. It just became and then you had Janet Jackson and all these other people wanting to perform with him. It just became this big thing. So yeah, no, that I love seeing stuff like that, and I never was into one particular thing. I
Genre.
mean, yeah, I mean, I've listened to everything from Gatemouth Brown and Coco Taylor all the way to Rachmaninoff and Bach to George Strait and
Yeah.
Chris Stapleton to heavy metal, Metallica, and there's
Oh
just
yeah.
this whole slew of things that I listen to, right?
I'm from like Johnny Cash to Johnny Rotten. I'm listening to everything.
That's
I
the
like
first
I
time
like
I've heard that one.
yeah. But I just I listen to pretty much anything. The new
Yeah.
wave to like I
Oh,
like progressive rockers like Yes and Peter Gabriel Genesis version. But yeah,
oh
I was
yeah.
just very much into you know the idea that you could push it, right? That I loved, listening to the Dead. I mean, I would go see the Almonds and,
Oh,
and Funkadelic and Sun Ra, and I would just like
oh.
totally,
George
I get
Clinton.
George Clinton, what Funkadelic Parliament, man, I'm just all over that. But Weather Report, I'm just everywhere, and I just like people that are willing to even like Zappa and the Mothers. It's like I like anybody that was gonna like
Oh,
push the envelope. And with Zappa, he pushed the envelope.
oh, did he ever? Oh yeah. What was it? Mr. Green Jeans, I think, was the song I used to listen to.
Yeah, he just is just out there. I mean, you might not want to like his humor. I mean, he's very sometimes he
Yeah.
like purposely seem to wreck his music with the humor. I mean, kind of make it less accessible. I
Yeah.
always felt like he made things less accessible on purpose because he didn't want those fans he didn't want some fans.
Well, true, and yeah, I mean, he wasn't doing it for that,
No,
and
he wasn't.
that's the crazy thing, right? He wasn't doing it for. I mean, you go back to the days of like Jim Croce, right? I mean, I don't think guys like that did it for the fame
They didn't do it
and
for the money. They just did it because
yeah,
they loved it.
yeah. There was a purpose behind it, and I think with both, with Zappa, I think it was more of an anti-establishment kind of issue for him.
Yeah, he didn't like the structure at all. So
Oh yeah.
he just liked to break it. He's a disruptor before the disruptors. um, so the idea of your book, does it translate to like, a movie? Like I know when people get caught up in these type of books, did you think of it in those terms or were you like, no, this is novel. I'm not
It,
thinking of
it it's funny you should ask that because that's been something that I've thought a lot about the way I write. So, being an actor as well, when I'm actually writing the storyline, and the the way I actually write is I sit down with just a quick idea of of a story that I want to tell. I don't storyboard it out. I mean,
it.
I occasionally I'll storyboard characters out,
Mhm.
but just in my head is what I want to do. And then I'll just sit down and start writing, and I just let it flow, right? Sometimes things work from a strategy perspective. Sometimes they don't. But as I'm writing, I'm visualizing everything in my head the way I would watch a movie, right?
Mm.
How does this play on screen? Because I think, and maybe wrong, it'd be interesting to see what the audience thinks. But I think a lot of times when people read, especially fiction, you're visualizing things in your mind as
Oh
you're
yeah.
reading it, right? And
Yeah.
so it kind of it's the same thing. It's a visual experience as you're reading, and so if it can't translate in that way, then I think it just misses the mark. So that's the way I think of it when I'm actually writing.
Yeah, I think that's because I always think of that terms even with music. I think of like sound paintings. I always like visualize songs as
Yeah.
stories, as paintings. And when I'm always a big sci-fi guy. I was always into like Ben Bova and Roddenberry and
Oh yeah.
Fahrenheit 451. I was listening. I was just reading all this, sci-fi, and I was into like EC science fiction comics, old EC books, that
Oh
were
yeah.
all not the horror ones, but the sci-fi ones that Wally Wood was doing. I don't know if you're into that, but
Yeah.
there was all this sci-fi stuff that was actually some of that stuff was like Twilight Zone, Outer Limit type of level stuff, but they used to be in the 50s. I just like the
Oh yeah.
pulp fiction books. They were
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
science
They
fiction.
were the old pocket, that like the old drugstore pocketback type books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was always drawn to those, and they always felt like every time I read them, I always got a visual. I just
Yep.
picked up this idea. But what about terms of like audiobook? Is your book going to be an audiobook? Because so many people consume books that way today because, that was always wondering about the audience in terms of the length word count. Like sometimes books today, they can't be 200,000 words. They can be like 60,000, 70,000, and then maybe they have to be audiobooks. What are your thoughts about those things?
Um, I think that audiobook is where today's audience is going because they multitask. You're listening to books or podcasts, whatever it may be, on the way to work or as you're going to and from. I don't think people have a lot of time to just sit and read a normal book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an old school guy, right? Like I can't read on Kindle. I can't do all that. I've literally got to be able to have
Physical book.
paper in hand. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the publisher did say for my genre that I'll sell more audiobooks than anything else. And so if I understood them correctly, it's going to be available in like 90 different languages.
Oh wow.
So they have invested in AI. They held out on the whole AI voice thing until it got to a point where it was more organic.
More so it actually feels good.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like you've got a computer reading it off. It sounds like an actual human. And so and the fact that it's going to be available in different languages is great because the entire storyline takes place between Munich and Nuremberg, which
wow. So it's like outside the US, it's like
the entire storyline takes place between those. And my wife is from Germany. She was born and raised there. That was my first duty station in the Army. I love the area. And so these were places I knew personally, firsthand that I had been there and I had walked those places, even including a couple of very specific places in the storyline that I still have friends from my service days that got married and stayed there and have spent the last 40 years over there. And they're still in the same house they lived in 40 years ago. And I used the description of that house in the book.
So, that's interesting because like if you live out, I lived in Tokyo for like 2 years, and there was something that was actually hard for me to come back because I got so used to being in Tokyo.
Oh yeah,
and I actually wanted to stay, and my company said, "Oh no, we're pulling you back," and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't want." Like, but like I imagine somebody like that lives that kind of life that's like out out as an expat that's out there.
Well,
is that kind of like in the spy, like ether of these people who live in outside, or they're more cosmopolitan, more international, or
well, I don't know about so much the spy realm, but I mean, I do know of guys from the teams that they spend a lot of time in certain areas around the world with the teams they were assigned to in those areas, and they've kind of retired into specific regions around the world, right? It's either through marriage or just because they love the area and kind of have a bit of an anonymity and piece of life that they've gotten accustomed to. I've been to 55 countries over the years, not nearly as many as I wish I had, but I mean some of those places I've been to over 100 times, and with all of the government military contracting I did for 20 years, there's just some places that you develop a connection to, right? You're there so often, you get to know the people, you get to know the culture, you get to know perspectives of how people think. And that actually is what drove me to do what I've done as a career, as a military contractor, and going to all these different places, because it always intrigued me even as a teenager. I wanted to see as much of the world as I could and learn as much about these different countries and different perspectives and different traditions and foods and all of those things.
Because the culture can inspire. Like if somebody's only been in like Iowa and they never get out of Iowa, right? but then you suddenly you're in, you're in the EU, or you're in the Pacific, or you're in the Middle East, and you pick up, different food, different language, different cultural mores and social norms. And then that's gonna rub off. It's like, oh, this is how these other people live. This is how they see things. Remember, I
Yep.
was in Japan. I just got a totally different perspective
Yep.
from a business standpoint. What was acceptable and what was not acceptable, right?
Oh
and
yeah, you don't go into Japan and try to do a hard sell, right? That's you don't do that. You'll never do business with that company again, right?
yeah,
You go in, you get to know the person, you sit and you have a cup of tea, you talk about your families, or
yeah, it's a totally
and
different thing.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it takes a while to build up to the actual business perspective of business meetings.
yeah. It's like for Americans who are like, I just want to get it done. I want to make that sale. Like, well, no, it's a little harder than that. But you have to,
Yeah,
you can enjoy it. I mean, I don't think it's hard. I loved it. I love being, I
yeah.
mean, I actually had a hard time sometimes with the guys from America that would come in really short term. They'd come in and I was there for 2 years and they'd be like, oh, do it this way. I said, well, that's not going to work.
That
And
won't
they
work
would
here.
try to tell me like, oh, well, I'm from the C-suite and you got, it's like, no, you got to understand it's not going to work. They don't want
I call those good idea fairs.
but so if you were gonna make this book into a movie, do you have like ideas for like who would play characters? Or
Yeah, I mean, I've had some ideas about that. The lead character I kind of had as I was writing it, like a Josh Brolin
mm, yeah,
idea, but which is funny because he's nothing at all like the the friend that I modeled that character after. So the lead character in the book, John Spencer, is former Special Forces, Army, ODA, came from a very broken and dysfunctional upbringing, that kind of thing. Which from a lot of the guys that I've talked to over the years, there's a lot of those guys with that story, which is why they ended up getting into doing that, right, as a means of helping and protecting others, right?
hmm
But my buddy Ron, who I kind of modeled this guy's career after, and kind of was an inspiration for that character. Not at all, nothing at all like Josh Brolin. It's like be night and day, right? But yeah, as I was developing the character and visually in my mind what he would look like, it's kind of along that lines, but more in a refined version, I guess. Um, and then the second lead character in the book, Benem Abbasi, who in the book is a retired Army ODA Special Forces guy, and another old friend of mine, Chengiz Lahiji, was longest serving member of U.S. Special Forces A teams in history, and he's Iranian. So
hmm
he grew up in Iran during the Shah's days. Um, he's great story. He's got a book out about his life. It's called Full Battle Rattle. So if anybody
wow.
likes that genre, and this is it's a biography, it's a great story. I mean, the guy's been involved in everything from the attempted rescue of the Iran hostages prior to Argo.
Mm,
He received permission from President Carter to go locate the hostages and plan a rescue mission. Um, and then if you've watched Black Hawk Down, where the helicopter's down and you've got a special operations team that's in the building right across from trying to reach them and get them, and they're being pinned down by sniper fire. He was actually there. So
wow.
Chengiz has been around the block. He's but the first Iranian American member of U.S. Special Forces A teams in history. And just he's a great American. He really is. And so he was kind of the basis for that character, Ben Mabasi. Um, I've been watching all kinds of TV shows and movies trying to find who would I cast as that role, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
you don't have any Omar Sharifs out there anymore. You
yeah.
know
It's
what I
hard to
mean?
find unless you're
Yeah.
watching like some like international TV or like into like a different channel.
Well, I just started watching a new TV show I'd never heard of before. It's been out for a few seasons called Tehran.
Oh,
And so it kind of it's half English, half Farsi. It's kind of an interesting show, but yeah, I just trying to find somebody that would fit that
would fit
role.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because you have to watch like international TV to find like a star from the Middle East or something that's like popular. Maybe you could find somebody
Oh
that
yeah.
you could get that idea. Because like in the West, we don't seem to have that kind of crossover as much anymore. I don't know.
Well, the supporting character in the book, Danny Doyle, that would probably be me to play that role.
So it's just really interesting. How this we were talking about the movie idea, but a lot of times today, things are like streaming. They
Oh
have
yeah.
these so they can be longer than a movie. So would
Yeah.
your book actually fit like a longer format that would be longer than just like a 2-hour movie?
This first book, no. And again, I think that goes back to what I was talking about. There are things that I learned in the process, and after the fact, I'm like, I probably could have added some additional ideas into that book and made it a little bit longer. Um, but I still think it's a riveting story.
Hmm.
There is a ton of action in there. There's nothing that's outlandish. Um, it's all things that have already happened at different intervals around the world. So it's all realistic type
Realistic,
stuff.
so it's not like total fantasy world.
No, no, and that's the thing. When you start talking about Navy SEALs, you start talking about Delta, or the CIA's Special Activities Branch, right? It's People have this idea that I guess have not been exposed to that world, that it's crazy, that it's something probably more than it is. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a lot of crazy aspects to that world.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the things that I try to do with the stories that I'm telling is I try to bring a human element to these guys. Right?
Hmm.
I've been very fortunate over the years to make friends with um, some wonderful guys in those areas. And there's a lot of respect and admiration I have for these guys, not because, oh, they're a Navy SEAL, or oh, they're whatever. It's more about their selfless actions. It's about their desire to help stand the gap and be there to protect others that can't protect themselves. Guys that are willing to lay everything on the line for this idea of what is America, and especially in today's um, disconnected
Yeah.
views of, right. Everybody's looking for somebody to hate versus, hey, let's find a way to come together. So knowing that there's people out there, no matter whether you agree with who they are, what they do with the military, whatever, right, they're willing to put everything on the line to protect your right to do what you're doing, because that is the American way of life. But at the end of the day, every one of those guys is somebody's son, they're somebody's brother, somebody's uncle, somebody's dad, somebody's husband, and there's a human element to that.
Yeah, you want to make him more multi-dimensional. You don't want to turn him into just like a Superman, or turn make him just like. The problem is sometimes people just turn people into like cartoon caricatures, are super simplistic, and you're trying to do more depth from what I hear.
Trying to, yeah, at least in a way that I don't think I think when people write these these books or do these TV shows and these movies. I think it's all about it's all about the action. It's all about the superhuman whatever.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more to it. And I've not really seen these guys represented in that way. And
Yeah. I kind of need to pull things back to, like, you think about movies in the 70s,
oh yeah,
in the 60s, they have a slower pace. People are willing to actually let the character be like human. Where now you have to have so many action sequences up front
yeah. I
that
mean,
you can't have
everything's got to be a
subtext.
Michael Bay film, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no, I mean, I don't know if I would say that the storylines are that slow paced, like going back to the 60s and the 70s and Fort Apache and those kinds of things, right? But I think there's more character development. I try to get a little more into the
More depth, yeah,
backstory so you understand and
who they are.
identify with the characters more and have a better idea of why they're doing what they're doing. There's also and in the current book I'm writing, which is going to be the first of a series. And it's about former special operator who goes into the CIA and starts working in the special activities branch. But there's a lot more backstory. I've tried to develop more of an intricate storyline, and maybe a couple of plot twists in there.
Yeah, because you kind of want the subtext. You don't want it to be so, like, the plot.
Oh yeah, and I could
2 pages in, you figured out the whole story. You don't want that.
and I could see each one of those books being a 4 to 6 part miniseries. I could definitely see that storyline because there's enough that really draws it out. And when you do those things, each episode has to kind of be its own storyline. And
Yeah,
I think there's enough in the way. Yeah.
it's interesting. Like, a lot of you mentioned, you're working on a book that's going to be a series. So is your first book going to be part of is standalone, or is it going to have additional chapters to it as like a trilogy or a full series, or it's going to be standalone and you're going to have this other series that you're working on?
For right now, the idea was for that first book to be more of a standalone. I say that with a caveat that it depends on how the audience reacts. If the audience reacts to it in a way that says, "Hey, we've really bought into these characters. Like, let's find a way to move this thing on, right?" And then, hey,
You could actually dive into it.
yeah, I'm all for it. But no, the series that I'm writing right now, even though there's the same genre, it's a completely different storyline. Now, I think there's a possibility that I could actually connect some of those characters. You look at like Clive Cussler when he was doing a few of the series he did. There was at least 1 or 2 books where the characters from this series and this series kind of
cross over, yeah.
cross paths in the storyline, and I think there's potential that if that were the case, there might be some potential to do that.
I think it's always, I love book. I love when I see that kind of cross connection, when you see these connections between things. It's just interesting to me when people can, maybe initially you might not, wrote it that way, but you can always back into things.
Oh yeah.
You can always forward, say, or tell us, hey, this is we're going to dive into this, and you can extend anything. you see in science fiction, they always extend everything.
Well, there's one thread that I think I weave through all the stories is, as we all grow, as we all get older, we realize things that we've made mistakes during our lives, for good, bad, or indifferent. Some people never recover from that. Some people can learn from it, but there's an underlying element of redemption.
Redemption. So that's
Um,
like the key theme is like redemption.
I don't know if it's the key thing, but there's definitely an underlying thread through most of these characters. Is there's times when you have to do things that, as a human being, you don't want to do, or you've never wanted to be put in a position to do. And sometimes those things can weigh heavy on a soul. And sometimes people react differently. I mean, some people turn to faith, which is kind of what I do these days. There's people that turn to alcohol or drugs. People that look for affirmation in other ways that aren't healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's times when people kind of come to a realization that, hey, this is not good, and I've made some mistakes, and I need to, I need to find a way out of this. I need to become
Yeah,
better. I need
absolutely.
to, so there's elements of that in there, especially in this first book. But it also exposes a vulnerability in the characters that I think most people would not expect for these kind of people, these kinds of men.
Do you think the vulnerability, like I talked to a lot of artists, and like vulnerability is kind of like the key to authenticity? And do you feel like if you make your characters more vulnerable, they makes them more authentic?
I don't know. I haven't really thought of it like that. It would make sense. Makes it more believable for certain, I think. If it's overdone, then
It's too much. Well, you can
it's too
overdo
much.
anything.
But really, that element for me really came more of humanizing. Because those are things that a lot of us go through, right? We
Hmm.
make mistakes, or we're too proud, or we're too stubborn to acknowledge it and apologize or correct it or whatever at the time. And years later, you go, why did I do that? Why was I so stubborn? And you try to make amends for those things, right? And so having that kind of aspect to these characters, that I think most people look at these guys and they go, oh, they're just these strong, stoic, warriors. You think of like the Spartans or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But and that's great if that's the way people want to be looked at. But again, there's a human element that people either don't want to see a lot of times or choose to ignore because it blurs their view or their vision of what these men are, right?
Yeah. That was always to me, like as a kid, I always like Peter Parker versus
Right.
Bruce Wayne, because like Bruce Wayne's like rich, he's a millionaire, right? He can buy anything. But Pete, he had a hard time even passing his chemistry class. So it's like he's still worried about little things, and he didn't have any money. He's always like getting bullied and he's getting pushed down. I always thought that was an interesting thing to have these characters. Maybe they're powerful, but they had like flaws,
Oh
and it
yeah,
made them more interesting
human.
because they had a flaw, or they weren't perfect. Their imperfections made them more interesting.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I was always more of a Richie Rich guy.
They like Archie, like the Archie stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess I was more like Jughead.
like Jughead. Yeah, with Archie, that's a whole thing. Because that's like a real you have like superhero comics, and then you have like Archie, like a real cartoony kind of comic. But yeah, it's different genres. Because even it
Oh
used
yeah.
to have a romance genre in comics that totally died. It was super big
Huh.
in the 40s and in the 50s, and it just dropped off the. It doesn't even exist. Um, it's interesting because it was really big, and then it just dropped, and nobody it
Oh,
didn't even come back.
I wonder if it was the same movement that got rid of booze back then, or if it was a part of the suffragette movement that killed it.
Yeah, I don't know why that just totally died, but it's interesting in terms of like what do you like to do when you're not writing? Because an author, we
Oh,
focus
really?
on writing, but like what other would you like to
Um,
reveal to the audience?
well, I mean, like I said, I do some acting. There's a movie on Amazon right now called The Beast of Trinity, Texas,
Mhm.
that a friend of mine wrote, and I play the priest in that movie. So people started calling me the priest from the Beast, which I thought was it's kind of an interesting. But that's on Amazon right now. I think it just hit 10 million minutes viewed on the
Oh,
movie or whatever. So, and then there was a TV show, a Christian TV show I did a few years back. And I think the scene should be coming out here in the next couple of months, I hope. So I'll do that on the side. I love to travel, like I said, every chance I get. And I've got a trip planned later in the year to take my daughter, uh, who's now 31, and she lives in Austin. She sings with a band in Austin,
cool. Oh, Austin's
and
awesome. That's cool.
yeah, Foolish Ones. There you go.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I love
So
that. That's a cool scene. Yeah, well, I like any of the music scenes around the country, but that's a good scene. But
yeah, but I'm going to take her to Ireland for the first time.
oh, that's
We've been planning that trip for a long time, and Ireland's kind of home away from home for me.
well, you've been there a lot.
I've probably been there 15 or 16 times. I've spent nearly 2 years total
Hmm.
in the country. My wife and I took my parents last year for the first time, and yeah, I my favorite place on the planet.
Well, you
Um,
really like it. So
yeah.
you just like to visit all the like historic places, or there's certain places you just know.
Well, there's places that I just know. I mean, by the time my wife and I got married, and we'd known each other for 30 years, but by the time we got married, um, I, we decided we were going to do our honeymoon there. She had
Mhm.
never been. And so I rented a car and she's like, don't we need a GPS? I'm like, nope.
Just go where you
And
go.
I just went where,
Jack
but
Kerouac on the road.
right. I mean, I've gotten so familiar, and I've traveled from east to west and north to south. Um, there's places that I've just come to truly love uh, over there, and typically we'll go to the same places every time I go, and I've just gotten to know people and know the areas, and then I found out later on in life that my family came from Ireland, and I've spent probably the last 7 8 years really tracking down the where we came from, because there was very very limited information, and it's taken a lot of time and effort to track that down. So my daughter and I will probably go visit that town this time for the first time.
Well, that's awesome. So yeah, it's a cool kind of going back to find your roots. That's cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, listen, the guy that does Finding Your Roots, what is his? Uh, is it Gossett? I
Hmm.
can't I can't remember, but he does that show. That guy's brilliant. I mean, his team can find.
Yeah.
If I ever did get famous, that's the guy I want doing
You want
that.
them to find it.
Oh, that guy's amazing. Yeah.
So what are some key lessons the audience can take away from your work, from your book?
Mm. Well, I would hope that an underlying lesson of you know being able to come back from mistakes, being able to make amends, being able to move forward in life. Right? Don't let your past condemn your future. Right? Understand that you're more than the sum of the mistakes that you make, and that you've always got the ability to move forward, and make changes. Um, Yet that there is hope, no matter who you are or what's happened. There's always hope.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that being an artist, I always feel um I'm looking forward to the next day. I'm always looking forward to like going onto my piano and just finding something else. because you just find a way. Like if you have a canvas and you're an artist and you like doing the work you do, you get inspired just as like I always want to put something on that canvas. You know,
Yeah.
that just feels like even if I have a period where I don't have an idea, I'm always looking forward to like when it's gonna come. I'm like I'm ready to receive it, like the download. People,
Yep.
he's like I'm gonna get a download from the muse. But I just want to thank you for being here today. I want to remind people that we have a QR code up there, and that's for the WW Dean Davidson author website. So if you just take your phone and do the QR code on it, it'll go right to that site. So if people go to that site, that's how they can get to your book and other things.
Yeah. Well, to get to the book right now, go to Amazon and look up the Amir the Tora Bora
Okay.
Vendetta. Right now, I'm in between webmasters, so
Oh,
I haven't gotten that uploaded there. So please forgive me, guys, but it's on its way.
it's on its way. Well, it will be there eventually. So
But hey, sign up. Go to the website. Sign up for what I call sit reps, which is no
mm,
military term, situational awareness report. But sign up for that. That's the newsletter, and I'll be putting out information about stuff that I'm currently working on. I've got 2 books currently in the works, and a few other behind the scenes kind of things.
and to let everybody know that we do have your Instagram there as well, but that will be available when you look at the platform that you're listening or watching on. We've been on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Kick, so those links are also available as URLs that you can click through in the podcast descriptions. I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Goes podcast today. I hope you have a great weekend.
You as well, and thanks again for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.